Hi, don't bother switching the videos. We're on all those other channels too. I'm Dax, and I'm happy to announce What's Under the Bed is an official affiliate of Fangoria magazine. What does that mean for you? Savings, that's what it means. Go to shop.fangoria.com or follow the links in the description. Use the code What's Under the Bed with Dax and get 20% off your entire order. That applies to first-time subscribers and one-time orders. That's 20% off of all the Fangoria swag. Pins, hats, shirts, mugs, beanies, and horror mags. What code? What's Under the Bed with Dax? Which one? What's Under the Bed with Dax? I can't tell you how excited we are at What's Under the Bed to be involved with Fangoria. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Now, enjoy the interview. I'm very excited for my guest today. Christopher Landon has truly made his mark on the horror genre. He's written screenplays for amazing films like Disturbia with Shia LaBeouf, as well as Paranormal Activity Parts 2, 3, 4, the marked ones, which he also directed, as well as Paranormal Activity Next of Kin. He's a second-generation filmmaker. His father was the late Michael Landon, who starred in the hit television series Bonanza, Little House on the Prairie, and Highway to Heaven. As a writer-director, Christopher Landon has given us a slate of films that push the genre in new directions and has paved the way for diverse representation in horror. His movies are character-focused horror with comedic elements. They are poppy and fun, but always deliver the kills, scares, gore, and goods. He's created movies like Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse, Happy Death Day, and its sequel, Happy Death Day 2U, and the body swap slasher classic, Freaky. He's been brought on to write and direct a reboot of Arachnophobia. I cannot imagine a better choice to bring the scares and laughs for that. I cannot wait. Chris, it's nice to meet you.
It's very nice to meet you. I have to give you a slight correction. I'm doing a remake of Arachnophobia. Not to be confused with Eight-Legged Freaks.
Oh, no! I guess I read it wrong. I'm sorry.
But sometimes people will call it that in the press. So I see the foible, but I don't want to get it confused with anybody at home.
No, I'm so sorry.
No, don't worry about it.
Okay, Arachnophobia.
Arachnophobia.
We'll fix it in post.
Well, yeah, we'll fix it in post.
Fix it in post.
So you were born in Los Angeles and were raised in Beverly Hills. What was your early childhood like, and what were you like as a child?
Early childhood, I had, it's funny. I had a combination of like a very basic and I would call semi-normal childhood in that, I was hung out with my parents and, I grew up in a big family. I grew up with 8 brothers and sisters. So it was a really loud, chaotic environment. And then atypical because, as you mentioned, like my dad was a celebrity and was a writer and director and actor, and so he worked a lot. And so I spent a decent amount of time on his sets, which is where I think I started to fall in love with the process of, I wouldn't call it filmmaking because he wasn't making movies, but at least the making entertainment, and even though I was interested in different things, I really loved watching him work, and was really inspired by that. So it's definitely where I kind of got that part of the bug. And then I think the other atypical part about my childhood is that, my parents divorced when I was very young. I think when I was about 5. And my dad just decided at one point to just let me watch horror movies. And so I really started watching serious horror films when I was probably about 6 or 7, and fell in love with them immediately. And so I would watch, probably like 4 to 6 horror films every single weekend. And that really didn't stop ever. It still continues. And so that was the other part that I think was kind of unusual, is that I didn't have a lot of friends whose parents let them do that. But I'm grateful that he did.
Is it true you grew up in a house previously owned by Polly Bergen, who was in the original Cape Fear?
Oh God, I don't even know that. I will tell you a less popular or a darker celebrity. I know that my dad bought our house from Bill Cosby. So that's who lived in our house before us. But yeah, I didn't know about the other person.
So before the influence of movies, what scared you the most as a child? Was there a fear of the dark or a monster under the bed?
I had I remember being very afraid. Well, I was afraid of spiders, and I still am, which is kind of ironic that I'm going to make a spider movie. But you got to face your fears at some point. And I was very afraid of like a home invasion thing. Like I was afraid that a stranger was going to break into our house and stab us to death. So those were, I think, my kind of nightmare scenarios. I think just because I recognized at an early age that there was a difference between monsters and real people. And the real people thing really scared me. I remember the first time I saw Carpenter's Halloween for the first time, like that movie like rocked me. Like I couldn't sleep for weeks. And I think it was because it felt so real.
Many kids are first introduced to horror through children's stories or fairy tales like Little Red Riding Hood or Billy Goat's Gruff. Was there a particular children's story you remember scaring you?
Yeah, The Exorcist. Oh wait, that's not right. A children's story that's you know what though? I remember when I was a little kid, I saw the movie Fantasia, and I remember my parents, and this was when I was like really, really young, and I can barely, like, I just have this weird, vivid memory of being terrified, not of the big kind of demon-y looking guy, but actually of there was this bit in the movie where these mops keep coming out, and like they keep, like he can never get anything clean or right. I remember this repetitive sort of thing, and it felt like a real nightmare to me, and it scared me for some reason. But I don't remember any fairy tales that scared me early on.
Oh crap. Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
What happened?
You're back.
Okay, we're back.
We're
Sorry
back.
about that.
We're back. Don't worry about it.
Sorry about that.
No, all good.
Hold on.
Oh
no. We
There's
use
a really cute cat.
we use my dad's phone as the camera, and I guess he's getting some work calls, and we were meant to fix that. Hold on.
I did, in fairness, do this early.
Yeah. 1 second.
Should I take a second?
I'm gonna try to help him with that. Hold on.
Yeah. It's all good. Don't worry about it.
I'll be back.
I'm here. I'm not leaving.
Here.
It's supposed to be on Do Not Disturb already.
No, I'm gonna be very careful with this. The Do Not Disturb might be
Worried about that.
messed up. Silence. Okay. Allows calls from no one. What?
All right.
Second call.
Let's get back.
Okay, there we go.
We
Fixed
gotta
it.
get the suspension.
All right.
I fixed it.
Back.
There we go. Hold on. There we go. We're back.
We're back.
I figured out the problem. I'm a tech genius.
I am not.
So I'm gonna continue from where we left off.
Yeah.
I read that the first horror movie you watched was Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho when you were about 6 years old. How well did that go over?
Bad. It was bad. Very, very, very bad. And so you have to understand, a long time ago, when I was a child, like, technology was not what it is today. And so, like, my parents were like one of the first people, I think, that we knew that like had like whatever version. I don't know if it was like a VHS or a beta, but it was like some old ass way to watch movies. And somehow they'd gotten a copy of Psycho. And I was supposed to be in bed, and I snuck into their room, and I hid behind this big chair that was in their room and watched the whole movie. And I made it weirdly through the shower scene, without freaking out. I remember I was paralyzed, but I still got through that. And then at the end of the movie, when Norman Bates comes running down the stairs and you realize that like he is dressed like his mother, I just started screaming. And I think it was just the image of this man in a woman's clothing with this knife, and he had this crazy grin on his face that terrified me. And that was it. And I started shrieking, and my parents realized I had snuck into the room, and then they took me back to my room, and I couldn't stop crying. And but I really feel like that was the bug that bit me. I think I wanted to sort of explore that more somehow. So, I love Psycho.
One of your father's first movies was the lead in I Was a Teenage Werewolf, and I've heard he was a fan of horror movies. Did he introduce you or guide you to the genre?
He did, 100%. I mean, he encouraged me to sort of explore the things that I was interested in, and he saw me back again. We used to go to video stores back in the day, and I would always drift away from the kids section and kind of linger in the horror section, and I would want to look at the pictures on the boxes of these movies, and he was the one that kind of said, it's okay if you're curious, it's okay if you want to see that stuff. He tried to curate it at first. Like he didn't just go for the worst stuff first. Like it was a little bit of like, it was Poltergeist and Gremlins and, some other stuff, but it didn't take long for me to get into the more serious and really scary stuff.
This is a photo of me and my dad on a movie set. My father is a location manager and would work out of town a lot when I was younger. I would usually visit him for a week, and he stopped working out of town once I started school. Both my parents are in the film business, and they were together for 16 years before they divorced when I was 5 years old. This is a picture of you and your dad on set.
Yeah.
Our childhoods have some parallels, only you had the added feature of having to share your dad with the world whenever he was home. Can you talk about what that was like and how it informs your career choices now that you're a father?
That's a very insightful question, and we do have a lot of parallels. I mean, it was interesting because my dad was not a celebrity to me. He was my dad. And so I always kind of stepped out into the world with a combination of sort of a feeling of surprise that people were so like enamored. And sometimes I felt jealous because I felt like I had to share him with a lot of people and I didn't want to. But like I mentioned earlier, because I would visit him a lot on set and I would see how happy he was working, it taught me that you can pursue a career that brings you a lot of joy and that you can bring that joy to a lot of other people in what you do. And so that was really inspiring to me. And I couldn't fully understand that or process that when I was a kid, but as an adult, I've come to understand that. And so now, I make it a habit. My family, at least because my kids are very young, I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. And so they'll travel with me when I go make movies. And they'll typically stay for pre-production, and then they'll stick around for a couple weeks into shooting. And barring any sort of COVID issues, they come and visit me on set. And I also wanted them to see me in my element, and I wanted them to see me really happy and fulfilled and surrounded by people who love to make movies, and to kind of really feel the joy that I hope that I try to, it's an atmosphere that I like to bring to my movies, because I want everybody to be happy when they're working. I want everybody to be comfortable and feel like they're seen and heard and that they can enjoy themselves. And so I think that's an important lesson for my kids as well. I want them to really feel that.
I read you dug deep into the horror genre and have a list of favorites that include Halloween, Rosemary's Baby, They Live, The Exorcist, The Thing, Poltergeist. But you also loved movies with more humor, like the Evil Dead series and Big Trouble in Little China, as well as more obscure films like Alice, Sweet Alice, Tourist Trap, and Microwave Massacre. I heard you say seeing aliens for the first time was a big deal. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, when I saw the movie Aliens, I went opening night, and I mean I had missed Alien in theaters because I was too young. I think that came out when I was like 4, so that didn't happen. But I was old enough to see Cameron's sequel, and again it was opening night, and it was packed, and I just remember just how intense the movie felt and how the whole audience was so wound up, and I was so there in the energy of that theater. And you know, there's the famous scene where Ripley comes out in the loader, and you know, she, you know, walks up into a close-up and then says, you know, "Get away from her, you bitch." And the whole theater screamed. And I mean, like, this is like nowadays, it's like it's the equivalent to like the Avengers, you know, Endgame, like those audience reaction moments, you know, that you see. And that was it. Like, I'd never felt that before, seen that before. And I just thought, God, I want to figure out how to do that, you know? And yeah, it was mesmerizing and intoxicating for me.
Like any 80s movie kid, you also loved movies like The Goonies, Gremlins, and all the John Hughes films. In fact, you've used these movies to describe some of your films. Jessica Roth says you have an encyclopedic knowledge of movies. If you don't mind, I'd like to read you a line from a John Hughes movies to see if you can guess the title. For example,
never gonna get these. This one.
For example, if I were to say, "For God's sake, would you cover yourself?" you'd say Chet from Weird Science. Is that okay with you?
Totally, I'll try. I might bomb this part, but let's do it.
First, that's why they call them crushes. If they were easy, they'd call them something else.
16 Candles.
That's correct. Second, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Oh God, I know this one. It's not Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
It is.
Okay.
It is Ferris Bueller's Day
Okay,
Off. You got it.
I'm sweating. I'm literally turning my air conditioning on. Hold on. I literally have to turn this on. I'm sweating. Hold on. Sorry. This is the thing to do, but this room just got really hot. It's all your fault. Okay. Oh, okay.
No.
All right, I'm ready.
So the third and final. If somebody doesn't believe in me, I can't believe in them.
Some Kind of Wonderful?
No. It's Pretty in Pink.
Oh, Pretty in Pink. Damn it. I knew I was going to mess that up.
We
Hey,
purposefully
2 out of 3. Come on.
Yeah, you got 2 out of 3. Woo!
Woo.
We purposefully put that last one there because we thought it would be difficult.
Okay, well, you succeeded.
Moving from that subject, I heard you had bullies in high school. I was bullied enough when I was younger to have to switch schools. In an age of bullies, active shooter drills, and COVID lockdowns, do you think horror movies can provide teenagers some catharsis and a safe way to process their real-life fears?
Absolutely, 100%. And I will say that while I think I was horror curious as a kid. But I think as I got a little bit older, and my sort of bullying at school intensified, I became horror fascinated. And I think that appetite increased dramatically because I needed an outlet. I needed a place to put all of my anxiety and all of my fear. And I think horror has always been that for people, you know, whether it's, you know, people processing things like, you know, you look at Get Out, you know, it's a way for people to process, you know, racism, and sort of, you know, all the other systemic social issues that we have, especially in this country. And so I think horror is a great way to, as you put it, it's a great catharsis point. But it's also, I think, a way for us to kind of intellectualize and understand our fears more, you know, in a way that's palatable. And so, yeah, I think I've said it before. I think if I didn't have horror when I was a kid, I think I could have ended up in a pretty bad way. I've told people that I think the genre has saved my life. And so that's why it means so much to me to keep making horror films and to sort of give back, I think, a little bit to what I got.
So you attended Beverly Hills High School. It has several horror movie alums like Roger Corman, Jamie Lee Curtis, Nicolas Cage, and Crispin Glover. Its swimming pool, is featured in the movie It's a Wonderful Life, and it's where Amy Heckerling sat in on classes when she was writing the movie Clueless.
Mm-hmm.
What were you like in high school, and how much of your high school experience do you think informs who you are today?
All of it. What was I like in high school? I was unpopular, incredibly shy. I ate my lunch in it wasn't even a hallway. You know, like when you're at school and you're in a hallway and then there's like another mini hallway, like where there might be like a couple classrooms. Like I ate my lunch in the other hallway, with a handful of other kids who were very much like me, who just sort of felt like we didn't fit in. And I did that all 4 years. I never stepped out of that really. But my friends were all really creative, and were so supportive of each other and really they helped me really embrace my love of all things horror. And like I would have a Halloween party every year at my house, but for like 8 people. But like we would decorate the hell out of it. Like we would do the craziest things. We would like go to swap meets and buy plastic baby dolls and then saw their heads off and hammer nails into their eyes and pour blood all over them and like decorate them all over the yard. And like, just, we went for it. And I really appreciated I knew that they were humoring me. I knew that was not their interest, but they knew it was mine. But they also, I think, again, and my best friend growing up, her name's Sharon, she's still my best friend. She hated horror films, but the poor girl went and saw every horror movie that came out in a movie theater with me because nobody else would go, and so I owe a lot to her for sticking by my side through all of that. And she thinks it's really funny now that I actually make these things.
You began making movies in high school. Do any of those movies still exist? And also, can anyone still see Xanadu 2 Bloodlust?
I've heard there's some weird bootleg copy of it still floating around colleges. So it's possible. I don't know where these films have gone. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, they were all on VHS and I'm sure are beyond degraded and long gone. I wish I had actually kept them. I wish I had somehow transferred them or done something with them, because I remember, they were ridiculous. Because Xanadu 2 wasn't even just a sequel to Xanadu. It was a zombie movie. Like, it made no sense at all, but it was fun.
After high school, you went to college at Loyola Marymount University to study film production, then switched to screenwriting. I think you were interning as a script reader for a production company at this time. You had made a short film that won a bunch of festivals, which led to your first writing gig. Can you tell me about what happened with this first round of success?
It happened when I was very young. I made that short film, I believe, when I was about 19, and And I got my first professional writing job, I think right around my 20th birthday. And I got it based off of the short film that I had made. And it was like a real writing gig. And there's a real movie that actually got made. It was called Another Day in Paradise. And so I had this weird sudden success. And I think everybody in Hollywood was very curious about me because they were like, well, who's this 20-year-old kid who wrote a movie? And so I ended up working a lot quickly. I got 2 like studio writing gigs. And then it became very clear to everyone I was working with and myself that I had no idea what I was doing. And so that ended up being fairly short-lived. My writing career crashed and burned within the space of a few years. And then I had to try and figure everything out again. And so that was kind of where the real, I think where my career actually started, was when everything went away.
I heard you scored one of your first short films. There's a question I like to ask my guests who are musicians. Do you believe more songs have been written about love, lust, or heartbreak?
Heartbreak.
Makes sense.
Glass is half empty. Sorry.
No, it's okay. What was your inspiration for writing Disturbia?
So it's really interesting, and timing. It's an interesting thing when you look back on your life and you see how things kind of fell into place. I was living in Texas, and had given up on writing altogether, and was there. And I actually was starting to study to get my real estate license. And I was living there and I didn't know anybody. So I was very alone and feeling quite lonely. I wrote a pilot to just try it. I'd never done it before. I'd never written something for TV. And I had sent it to a friend of mine who was a producer. And I said, will you just read this and tell me if it's awful? And then I didn't hear from her for a while. And so I thought, oh, it was awful. And then like 3 weeks later, she called me and she said, hey, I sold your pilot. And I was really excited. And so I moved back to LA to pursue that. And then that pilot ended up not going forward. And so it was like, just as I was about to like slide back into my, oh, why did I bother kind of attitude, I was sitting in traffic in LA, which is something we do all the time. And there was a story on the radio on NPR about Martha Stewart. And this was back when she was on house arrest. And that's when I got the idea for the movie. I was like, well, what would happen if you were on house arrest and you couldn't leave your house and you were bored out of your mind? Like, and you couldn't, what if your TV was taken from you and your video games were taken from you, and like, you would start spying on your neighbors. And then I had this sort of, that's when the sort of John Hughes meets Hitchcock idea kind of, it really came together in my brain super fast. And I just went and I wrote it, and the rest is history.
How did you take over writing for the Paranormal Activity franchise?
So that was connected to Disturbia. Someone I had worked with on Disturbia brought me in to what they call like a round table. So they had brought in a few writers to try and fix that sequel, because they tried to do what Oren Peli did on the first movie, which was, let's just wing it. Like, let's come up with a concept and wing it. And so they shot for, I think, 2 weeks, and it was a disaster. So they brought a bunch of us in, and I started pitching ideas and scenes. Like, there's a scene in Paranormal Activity 2 where, you know, the mom goes into the nursery, and then as she's looking into the crib, she gets ripped out of the room. And I actually pitched that sequence that day. And after the meeting, the guy that I had worked with on Disturbia asked me to stick around, and he said, hey, will you go write that scene, and we're going to shoot it. And so they did. And then they were really happy with it. And so they started bringing me back. And then that was it. I you know, wrote the movie. And I think that was the interesting thing about it, which was they kind of realized we needed a real script to get through it. And then while we were finishing Paranormal Activity 2, that's when I got the idea for 3, which was to do a prequel, and shoot the whole thing on VHS, or at least make it look like it was shot on VHS and set it in the 80s. And so it kind of just became a thing. Like I got very invested in the mythology and the characters, and I really love those movies because they were really hard to make. They look easy, but found footage is a really, really tough format because you can't rely on score and music to tell people how to sort of feel. You don't have coverage. You have to explain why somebody's filming something all the time, and it's really challenging. It's a really challenging way to make a film. And but I loved the sort of verite style of it all, and I liked that there was this realism to it. And so I had a really good time making those films.
After writing and directing Paranormal Activity, The Marked Ones, you wrote and directed one of my favorites, Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse, which felt like a mashup of The Goonies and Dawn of the Dead. Do you prefer fast zombies or slow zombies?
Well, if they're chasing me, slow. But if I'm making a movie about them, fast. I like a fast zombie. I mean, when I saw 28 Days Later, I was like, yeah, fast zombies.
How does one go about selecting a zombie choreographer?
What's really funny about it is that, like, I had to work with it. We had so many extras that we had to hire a coordinator to kind of like show people at least some of the movement. But I often found myself having to do it as well, which is really embarrassing. And I'm pretty sure that somebody has a video of me doing it. But yeah, I mean, making zombie films is tough. That movie, to this day, that was the hardest movie I've ever made, because there were a lot of challenges, and it was all nights, so I felt like a vampire. And yeah, and a lot of zombies, and a lot of people falling because they can't see because they're wearing these really thick contact lenses, and it's at night. So it's dangerous work making a zombie film.
We lost Cloris Leachman in 2021. She's a legendary actress who won 8 Emmys and the Academy Award for The Last Picture Show. She was on The Mary Tyler Moore Show. She was in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, as well as several Mel Brooks films, including Young Frankenstein as the character Frau Brucke.
Beautiful.
Sorry, I could not resist.
Thank God.
What were the first words she said to you when she arrived on set?
The first words she said, and they were not to me. She pulled up in a car. Her assistant was driving, and the window rolled down, and she looked at Logan Miller, who was her scene partner, and she looked right at him, and she goes, "I'm gonna eat your ass." and it was a reference to what was in the script, which is a scene where, when she's a zombie, her teeth get knocked out of her mouth, and she attacks him, and she starts biting his butt cheek. But because she doesn't have teeth, she can't break skin. But that was it. I swear to God, that was the first thing she said. And Logan and I burst out laughing, and Cloris did not disappoint. Like, I was so impressed by how sharp she was, how funny she was, how foul-mouthed she was, and she really was a legend. And one of my favorite memories of her was when we would wrap her at the end of the night, I would always escort her arm in arm to her car waiting outside. And as we walked through the crew and everyone, she gave everyone the finger. She flipped everyone off. And then even outside, we would have like looky-loos, like all these people, like the neighbors who were out watching us make the movie, and she would double bird them. It was like, she was amazing. She was a wonderful human being.
So then you directed Happy Death Day, originally titled Half to Death and called Happy Birthday on posters in French.
Yeah.
It's a Groundhog's Day slasher film. There's so many great interviews on this film and its sequel, Happy Death Day 2U, so I will only touch on it briefly. What was Carol?
What was what?
What was Carol?
What was Carol?
I heard it was like a wig. And there was a
Oh,
wig.
Carol! Sorry, that took me a second to figure out. Oh wait, my son's coming in. He's invading the interview. Say hello.
Hello.
I know. I'll be right with you. I promise.
My Bloody Valentine.
Okay.
Great.
See you, Minor. Big fan of My Bloody Valentine.
That's exactly what my dad just said.
Oh, really?
Behind the scenes, he was like, he was wearing My Bloody Valentine,
Yeah,
and
that's
then you
amazing.
said that.
So Carol, I'm sorry, I blanked. Carol was, so when we shot Happy Death Day, Israel Broussard has this beautiful mane. He has very thick, wavy, borderline curly hair. And after we shot Happy Death Day, he went and made another film where they shaved his head bald. And I was like, oh God. And so we had to wig him because we had reshoots. We changed the ending of Happy Death Day. And so when he came back, he had to wear this wig, and we were low budget. And so we got a really bad wig, and it was so ugly and so bad that I named it Carol. Because I don't know, it just looked like that was what would be on Carol's head. And so, yeah, I called it Carol, and that was that story. And every time it was very painful for me to watch the end of the movie because I think the wig is so obvious. And I don't know if it's that obvious to everyone else, but if you go watch it now, you will be like, oh my God, that's a terrible wig.
Did you get in any trouble when the stunt driver smashed the Mercedes?
I did. We again, because we had no money, we were shooting the scene where Tree is fleeing the hospital, and we're in a parking garage, and I had promised the producers that it was just going to be a light tap, because they had made it very clear to me that they didn't want to have to deal with fixing any cars, and they didn't want me to bump the fender, whatever it was that they had said to me on the day. But right before we did the take, I snuck over to the stunt driver and I just whispered in her ear, I said, floor it and just smash it. And so nobody knew. And so she just went and did it and just crushed the front of this car. And that's what's in the movie. And it's a terrible thing. And I should never say this out loud to any aspiring filmmaker, but there will be moments in your career where you know the right thing to do. And that you may just have to kind of break the rules to get it. And sometimes you have to do that, you know? And I've done it other times. When I made Freaky, there's a scene in that film where Millie is chased out onto a football field by the butcher, and he tackles her. And as he raises this, mystical dagger, the Dola, above her, the ground drops away and reveals that they're at the top of a temple. And I had written that into the script. And again, the people with money said, no chance. You're not doing that. That's going to cost too much money. We can't afford it. And so I just politely nodded and smiled and said, okay. And then on the day when we were shooting the scene, I had them just bring out a massive green screen and covered the field, because then it had to be a VFX shot, no matter what. And so I got my way anyhow. So you just, sometimes you just do stuff because you have to.
I've also heard that the beginning scene was meant to actually be the song, but they said no.
Scout's Guide.
In Scout's Guide.
Oh, yes, it was
Sorry.
another time I did it. I'm really gonna have a reputation if anyone ever actually sees this, and if producers see this, they're gonna never hire me. But yes, I was not supposed to use that song because it was really expensive. And so on the day that we shot it, I actually blasted the song, and I had the actor sing along to it, so that they had to buy it. I'm terrible. I'm such a terrible. But here's the thing, and I stand by this, which is almost every time it's worth it. Like, the car crash was in the Happy Death Day trailer. The crazy temple was in the Freaky trailer. Like, they always end up using the moment, right? Like, they sell the movie with the thing that they had originally said no to. And thus I end up coming full circle to it, which was, I was right.
I heard you pitched Happy Death Day to you when you were editing Happy Death Day. Is there any progress to report on Happy Death Day to us?
Okay, so we are, and look, it's going to be a long road, but we are actually really talking about making this. I'm not allowed to talk about the details of it, but like it is getting shockingly close. And I'm really excited about it because I really feel like I'm going to have the chance to really do it right. So we will see. But I know everybody wants to. Like the studio's behind it, Blumhouse is behind it. I want to do it. Jessica Roth really wants to do it. So we'll see.
After Happy Death Day 2, you directed a fun and gory body swap movie called Freaky. I believe the script was called Freaky Friday the 13th, and the working title was Swap Shop. You've also given so many great interviews about this movie, so I will touch on it briefly again. First, my father was asked to be the location manager for this film, but was already working on another show at the time.
Thanks, Dad.
Thanks, Dad. He was invited to visit the set, and he took me with him. I was there when you filmed the blacklight putt-putt golf scenes. I got to see Vince Vaughn, but you and I never had a chance to meet.
Well, that's a bummer.
Yeah, it really is. There are so many amazing and original kills in this movie. A bottle, a cryo chamber. You even kill Cameron from Ferris Bueller with a table saw. Do you keep a journal filled with fun ways to kill people?
I don't, and it's surprising. And I should. Whenever I write something, it's the math is actually very simple. I always kind of look at a setting. Like, what's germane to this setting, right? So when the movie begins, we're supposed to be in this very fancy house with this art collector. And so I immediately just started thinking of, okay, well, wine. Rich people have wine collections. Rich people have tennis courts. And that's honestly where I always start. And for some reason, I have a bizarre knack for coming up with really violent ways to kill people, but in a pretty cartoonish way, and that's where I think my love for Raimi comes in. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to come up with these kinds of kills, and it's fun to try and figure out how to actually pull them off. Sometimes they're really, really complicated, and I do try to do things as practically as possible. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I've heard you make playlists for each project you do. What songs would have been on your Freaky playlist?
Oh God, I have it. I can read them to you. It's right here on my phone. I will show you. All right, let's go to the Freaky. So you'll see, okay, so I'm gonna hold it up to you. You'll see FF13. So that's Freaky Friday the 13th. Who did I have? I had Billie Eilish, Grimes, The Knife, Chromatics, Vampire Weekend. Who else did I have in there? Oh, more Billie Eilish. I had a lot of Bear McCreary just because sometimes I need score to kind of help me through it. But yeah, I've got a bunch of lots of random stuff, and some stuff that actually ends up making it into the movie. And then stuff that I could either never afford but it's really important to me to come up with a playlist that I don't listen to the music while I'm writing because that's distracting. And some people do. But I just like to have it as almost like in the way that a lot of gymnasts will listen to music to like psych themselves up before a routine. I use music that way. Like I kind of will listen to stuff that gets me in the mood and gets me excited to like sit and write. And it just kind of helps my brain understand where it's supposed to be.
So what's the secret to finding humor in something that's terrifying?
I don't know, life. I was raised on a steady diet of gallows humor. I think you know, coming from a divorced home, I think, you know, when my dad passed away when I was 16, and part of our bond through that really painful time was finding the humor in death. And that's the honest to God truth. And I remember, you know, when my dad was sick, he had a lot of people around him who, you know, they do the things that you're supposed to do, which is like, you're gonna pull through this, you're gonna be okay. But my dad had a really serious and deadly form of cancer, and you know, he knew that he wasn't gonna be okay. And I, being the kind of kid that was like a deep dive researcher, and this was pre-internet, but I devoured, you know, research on cancer, and quickly discovered that like it was bad and he was probably not going to survive. And so I bought him a cartoon book called Unpleasant Ways to Die. And it was a book, it is an animated book of really absurd and funny ways to die. And I wrote on the inside, "It could be worse." And I remember how much he appreciated that. You know, it was sometimes you have to laugh at the dark to get through it. And I've done that my whole life. And so I think that's again why it's no surprise that I blend so much humor in my horror, because it's hard to separate them for me.
Why do we love horror movies that involve teenagers?
Because teenagers are stupid. No, I'm kidding.
Hey. Hey.
No, I think when you're a teenager, everything is heightened. You know, love, fear, anger, anxiety, everything is so at the surface, and it's such a seminal period in your life where you're transitioning, you know, and it's and at no other point in your life do you have one foot firmly planted in your childhood and your other foot in adulthood. And so I think that's the fascination. And I don't know why we kill them. There's a lot to unpack there, and we probably don't have the time to do it. But I do think that that's why people are fascinated with that particular age group. And that's why it's not just horror. You know what I mean? Like there are all kinds of movies that are, you know, dead focused on, pun intended, on teenagers.
Great puns. Puns are great.
I'm full of puns.
So you grew up in the 1980s video culture and VHS cover art. I'm fascinated by this topic. Can you explain how important the cover art was for horror movies?
Oh my God, it was everything. I mean, it's the way that, like, I think the equivalent now is like how if you're watching Netflix has like those 10 seconds to talk you into that thing you might watch, right? That little weird preview. And it's not always like a trailer. Sometimes it's like just a scene, you know? And that's what those boxes were. You know, they had to draw you in, and they had to compete with so many things in your eye line. And so like the graphics and like everything was real, especially for horror. And this was like the heyday of horror because, you know, everybody could make these movies on the cheap, and make lots of money. So everybody was doing it. And it was kind of the Wild West. So like these movies could be like obscenely violent and crazy, and they got away with it because they weren't being regulated yet, or at least in the way that they would be. And so, yeah, I mean, you would walk into the video store and it was just like, you know, pardon my French, holy shit. Just crazy stuff. And, you know, the weirdest one got my vote. Like I would just grab them, you know? And it was really fun. I mean, look, it's something that a lot of people today won't understand, younger people. Like it was one of the things I loved about video stores is that like, it wasn't immediate gratification. Sometimes you had to like work for that movie. Like you could go to a video store 5 weeks in a row and never get the movie you wanted. Like it was rented. Like you could not get it. And so when you finally got it, it was so exciting. It was like winning the lottery. You know, and it's different now because you can watch anything, anytime, you know, you want.
Anywhere.
Except
for Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
Ah,
I cannot find it anywhere.
really?
No, it's nowhere. But that's
Oh, yeah.
another topic.
That is, yeah, exactly. Rabbit hole.
Was there any favorite cover art that you remember?
Oh God, favorite cover art. God, this should be like leaping to the top of my brain. I mean, there were weird ones that I thought were cool that I don't know why they stick to me. There's this weird horror film I remember called Visiting Hours, and it was the outside of a hospital, and the windows that were turned on formed a skeleton. And I just thought like, oh, that's clever. And I remember the cover of this movie Maniac. I loved Tourist Trap, which we talked about. That cover really grabbed me. It was really creepy. But God, there's so many. It's almost like a blur. I have like a coffee book in my house that has tons of them, and they're so cool.
Blumhouse had great success with The Invisible Man. Did I hear you wanted to reboot Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
I didn't actually actively pursue that. I thought it was interesting. And you know, but it was never like a thing that they brought to me at all. I did incidentally, I wrote a sequel to The Invisible Man after Lee's movie. I wrote that for Blumhouse. They didn't make it, which really bummed me out because it was a really good fucking sequel. But you know, shit happens. But yeah, I haven't jumped into their sort of movie monster library. But nothing's really jumped out at me, to be honest. I think Lee crushed it with The Invisible Man. I think that he figured out the coolest way to make that film. And I would need an idea like that for me to really go for it.
Who is the first person you show when you finish a script?
The first person that I show, I don't have one person, you know. I think it's because a lot of the stuff that I write tends to be different. And to be perfectly honest, sometimes the first person I show is the people I work with. I wish I had some sort of like sage, you know, brilliant friend, and I have a lot of smart friends who are also writers, but yeah, it's really funny. I tend to be very siloed in my work. And I'd really try to keep it in a very professional lane. I will show a lot of people the first cut of a movie that I make. That's very different. That kind of feedback I find to be really constructive because you're working with something that's very tangible. Whereas if I show a bunch of writers a screenplay, they could come in and be like, oh, well, I would just do this instead. And they change the whole DNA of your movie. And so I find that it can be very confusing for me because there's too many cooks in the kitchen, and I like to keep my process very streamlined because I usually know what kind of a movie I want to write. But once I've shot something, it's super helpful. Like I will invite 15 to 20 filmmakers to a screening and just let them, you know, eviscerate me.
What is your first tattoo and your last tattoo?
My first tattoo is on my back. My dad's initials. I got it on my 18th birthday. And my last tattoo is on my arm, and it says Jessica. And that was one of my closest friends who also passed away tragically in a plane crash. So my body is a graveyard. I have really dark tattoos on my body. No, I mean, it's funny, like sometimes people ask me if I ever regret getting tattoos, and I always say no, because for me they're reminders. And I honestly, like the Jessica one on my arm I got because you know, as time goes on and after you've lost someone, there will come a point where you won't think about them every day. And I didn't want that to happen. So I was like, I'm going to put her on my body, so I have to remember her every single day. So.
Do you prefer CGI or practical effects?
Practical. Nobody likes CGI.
Huh, that's funny. That's my dad's opinion too. Dumb cartoon.
I mean, look, the reality is like, and I have to use a lot. I like the movie that I'm in post-production on right now is packed with CGI. I have 1,400 shots in the movie that are CGI shots. So they're very necessary, very, very necessary. And when done right, it's unbelievable. And I look to movies like Planet of the Apes, you know, like I think that whole trilogy is mind blowing, how beautiful that stuff looks. But generally speaking, I mean, I think the naked eye can tell the difference even when it's really good. And I just prefer the realism of practical stuff. And I think it just looks better and everybody will go to the same well, like, you know, The Thing, you know, and, you know, even though it was a bitch to do it and a lot of shit goes wrong, I think that at least as a base to do something practically and then use the VFX to enhance it, you know, to hide the seams, to kind of clean it up. But go for it if you can. Some things you just can't do.
Have you ever experienced any paranormal activities? Pun very much intended.
Yes. I lived in a haunted apartment a long time ago. We had a very nice ghost that lived with us, and he was a gentleman, and I was grateful to have a third roommate.
So this last question is a Sophie's choice. Two must die so that one may live. Number 1, Breakfast Club. Number 2, John Carpenter's Halloween. Or number 3, Mommy Dearest. Two must die so that one may live. Just making clear.
This is really tough. This is super tough. Oh my God, I'm really torn. I'm gonna say Mommy Dearest, and it's a very controversial choice for me because it's a movie that is very important to me and very near and dear to my heart. But I learned more from the other two films, and they informed me, I think, much more as a filmmaker.
There's a second one that you have to cut out.
Oh, I have to kill 2?
You have to kill 2, and one.
I thought one must die, so 2 could live.
Nope.
Oh, fuck. Well, jeez, it's terrible. Well, then goodbye, Breakfast Club. Halloween must.
Oh, that's great.
Halloween must live.
Halloween lives.
Yeah.
That's the opposite of the new movie.
Yes, it is.
I was going to ask you to tell the story about meeting Faye Dunaway on an elevator, but you just told it recently on another podcast. So.
I ruined it. Sorry.
Well, no, you said it on another podcast, so we weren't going to mention it. Is there anything you want to ask me before we head off?
Yeah, actually, I do. What got you so into horror?
Oh. Well, I've grown up on it. My first horror movie I finished was the movie Jaws, which was amazing, and I loved it a lot. And I've just always loved it. It's been a great thing to watch. It's a pastime that me and my dad share a lot together, and he always wants me to watch movies with him. So I tend to watch a lot of horror movies with my dad. So it's a lot of good memories.
That's great. The same. I mean, that's what I did with my dad. I watched tons of horror movies, and it was great. It was like it was our thing, and I didn't have to share that with anybody else in a very crowded house. So I totally relate. And do you want to make movies, or you just love watching them?
I want to get a job in the movie business. I don't know what job yet, but I do want to get a job in it.
Well, call me when you're ready.
I'm gonna end up trying to.
When you're
I would love to.
Legal adult, call me and I'll be ready. I'll hook you up. Whatever it is you want to do.
That's great.
Well,
so where can people find you? Oh, is there more that you wanted to say?
No, I'm good. Where can people find me?
Okay.
Oh, you mean like social media, that kind of thing?
Social media, what? No, we mean your house.
Yeah. So my address is. I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Twitter. That's all I have. I'm not a TikTok person. I'm too old. And I'm not really a terribly active person on either of those. Like if you go to my Instagram, which is open to the public, you'll you'll see a lot of pictures of my kids. It's very basic, but there's a lot of movie stuff too. So if I'm on set, there's a lot of behind the scenes kind of stuff that I like to post if I'm allowed. And on Twitter, you know, if I'm not talking about a work thing, then maybe it's something I'm pissed off about, which I try not to indulge too much because there's a lot of that out there now. But yeah, that's where I am. I don't even know my handles or whatever it is, but you can find me there if you try.
That's great. Well, it was very nice to talk with you. I'm going to stop recording now.